Hello everyone, welcome to what is going to be the first in a series of videos about the colour theory of Frankenstein 2025. I must say, I wasn't, because I remember when this film first got announced and I was like, Guillermo del Toro, love Guillermo del Toro, love Oscar Isaac, love Mia Goth, and then I saw Jacob Elordi was cast as the creature and I was like, Jacob Elordi of the Kissing Booth fame. Wasn't exactly sure about that one, but I have to say this is quite possibly my top film of 2025. It is phenomenal. If you haven't watched it yet, number one, what are you doing here? But number two, please go and watch it. Whether or not you watch it before or after my video, well, no, actually watch it before because there's spoilers. Watch it before. Spoiler warning, by the way, there's gonna be spoilers, but please watch it. Such a phenomenal film. To the point where it's like I watched it on Halloween. I was lucky enough to watch it in cinemas on Halloween, and it is genuinely the only thing I thought about for weeks now. It's, as of recording, it's the 17th of November. This film has it's instilled itself in my brain. I can't escape. But God, just every facet of it, like the storytelling, the costumes, the set design, the casting, the character, everything is phenomenal, I must say. And it's different from the book, but everything doesn't have to be the same as the book, it's an adaptation for a reason. So yeah, anyway, this series is essentially going to be me talking about the colour theory of the film, because this is very tied into the costuming and the storytelling as well, but the way that costume designer Kate Hawley has designed everything and how it relates to each character and how it reflects on each character is something I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. It's like they did an interview about it not too long ago and I thought that was pretty cute, but it's not something that's quite as predominantly spoken about, I suppose. So yeah, that's what this video series is going to highlight. I was going to do it all in one video, and then I started writing Victor's part, and as of right now I've only written Victor's part, and it took me 4 days, so I'm going to do it in sections. This video, part 1, is about Victor, and then I'm going to go on to Elizabeth in part 2. Part 3 will be William and Harlander combined, because there isn't as much to say for them, but it's still very important to the story, so I figured give them their own section. And then the final part, and arguably I think the most intensive, is the creature, because not only are his costumes very important to the story, but he is very dependent on the lighting as well, because he's a bit more monochromatic than everyone else. So I think that in and of itself deserves its own video. So yeah, this is gonna be part 1, Victor. I hope you enjoy. I apologise if it gets a bit rambly. There is so much to talk about in this film that I can't quite stop myself. So without further ado, here is my analysis of Victor Frankenstein in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein 2025. In a shocking turn to no one but myself, I'm not quite as eloquent as I'd hoped I'd be in the recording process. So there's going to be a few interjections from me, editing Malavi, when I need to build on a point or re-articulate myself. Hopefully these are going to be few and far between, but I doubt it. We're going to see. We'll see. But yeah, I hope they're going to include some extra insight for you all and help you understand my thinking a little bit more. Thank you all again for watching, and I really hope you enjoy. When we're first introduced to Victor, he is an adult because he is in the frozen tundra with the creature and the Danish seamen who are stuck in the ice. I am going to skip that in the intro purely because, it comes back around again and it's at the emotional climax of the film in the very last scene. And that has enough brevity in it that I feel I don't need to reiterate what I'm going to say. It's good enough that it's put at the end. If you see what I mean. You'll see what I mean. You'll see what I mean. When we're first introduced to Victor, he is in his youth, and it's him and his mother. They are together in their manor, and his father is returning home. In this scene, he is dressed in an all-white suit, which is, when you look at white, it's meant to signify purity. It's meant to signify new beginnings. It's meant to signify, kind of untouched by the woes and perils of man. He is young, he is innocent, and as of right now, he is simply trying to live his life with his mother. He's not yet tainted by the hardships of the world, but all of that is shrouded in a dark blue coat, and like a dark blue overcoat, which is his father's palette. His father is, he's meant to be the top doctor, as established by Victor, but he's shown to be like a cold man. He's very uncaring, uncouth towards his son. And it's specified why he feels that way towards his son. As Victor says himself, he didn't like his son and his wife because of their dark hair and dark eyes. In his world, having, light eyes, like blue eyes and blonde hair, that's kind of his ideal version of a son, which is why he's so distant towards Victor in the first place. And on the note of his mother, in a lot of interviews you'll hear that Victor's main motif colour is red. You see it throughout the entire film. It's expertly woven into kind of the very fabric of the story. That red is kind of given to him by his mother, because when you see every single scene you see his mother in, she is completely shrouded in red. Every single thing that she wears is red. The entire dress, despite the layers and layers and layers that go into kind of creating a dress like that, all of them are this kind of blood red colour. Especially in the scene where her and young Victor are standing on the stairs waiting for his father to arrive. She's wearing this complete red ensemble, complete with a hat and a veil that make her almost look ghostly, like she's not fully there. She's very aloof. She's ready to go at a second. You're never quite sure whether or not she's there because of how she's shrouded in this mystery. This red, it's very obvious that everything Victor does, he does it in his mother's image, quote unquote, which is why he adopts that red only after she's gone. Before that, you don't see him in any red. It is the scene of her funeral in which you see him wearing the red necktie for the very first time, which is a very persistent article of clothing you'll see throughout the rest of the film. I would like to say, I do think it's interesting to note that the very first time we see Victor don any form of red in the entire film, still as a child, is with the blood of his mother. In the scene where she's about to pass away, when she's actively bleeding and about to have her child, the blood on her hands immediately imprints itself onto Victor, as in, like, she reaches for him, she grabs for him because she's in pain, she's in turmoil. That's kind of what you're supposed to do. But her bloodied handprints stain his, white ivory clothes. It's the very first time that he's been tainted, because in a cruel twist, the world has taken the one thing that, the one person that truly understood him, that truly, kind of understood what he had going on. Because at no other point during this, apart from with Elizabeth, at no other point during the film does anyone kind of mimic his red colour palette, once again, apart from Elizabeth. That, immediately sets him apart. And this is a recurring theme that you'll see with a lot of the characters. Whenever someone has a main motif, it's not typically mirrored by anyone else. It is only Victor, Elizabeth, and the creature, with a little bit of William in there. But the fact that no one else mimics this, apart from Elizabeth, shows that, at this point in his life, he is truly alone, and he is at somewhat of a parallel to his father. Because, you see it a lot in media. People are like, as opposing sides, you'll have red versus blue. Which, you see it a lot, but it's technically not correct. On a colour wheel, the opposite of red is green. But whenever you have a primary colour on the colour wheel, its opposing colour will always be secondary. It will always be something that is mixed between. You have your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. It will always be a parallel. Red and green, blue and orange, yellow and purple. So I think the fact that Victor's father is kind of given that more blue motif showcases that they are not quite as dissimilar as Victor wants to be or hopes to be, or just simply they are not as different as as he thinks they are, which I think is quite an interesting parallel. As you see later in the film with the tagline "Only monsters play God," it's kind of like he transformed into his father. He transformed into the one thing he would never wish upon his worst enemy. I did make a note. Whenever I'm looking down, I'm looking at my laptop. I've made a lot of notes. I should have written a script, but I didn't. I've got notes instead. I did make a note saying that his outfit at the time of death, given the bloody handprints and whatnot, perfectly mirrors her coffin. You know, it's mostly white, mostly unstained, but you will always have that kind of, on Victor it's blood, on her it's roses. You know, she has the rose flower motif cut out around her face, but it's that kind of untainted apart from the upper body. On Victor's mother, on Claire, on her coffin, it presents itself as almost a halo, you know. In death, she is shown in her purest form. Whereas with Victor, considering it's, you know, bloody handprints that have been imprinted onto his ivory clothing, it makes him seem as like kind of almost dirtied. You know, he's been tainted. He is no longer pure. So it is like it's very much a parallel between the two, between in death she is pure, in life he is soiled. In life he is forever sullied. And yeah, I think it's quite interesting. As a sidebar, I just wanted to say, going back to the coffin point, it could be that he truly views himself as an extension of her. So he's trying to mirror her in any way that he can in the kind of, you know, the last time he's ever going to see her. At this funeral scene, once again, this is where the first facets of red colour come into his general outfits. But this is also mixed with a lot of black because, you know, he's in his mourning period. He's just lost his mother, the one person that truly understood him, and has instead gained a brother that, you know, he's not exactly going to have a hand in raising. He knows that his father's just going to take him away and build him to be the perfect child that Victor could never be. So in this statement, like, he's truly been left alone. So as he goes with his very dramatic cape, he's realizing that he's truly left alone, and he's going to have to kind of figure his own way out from here on out. The cape in and of itself is indicative of the comfort Victor knows he's not ever going to receive again. He's not going to have that kind of loving mother's touch for the rest of his life, forever gone in his mother's absence. He's almost using it as a way to hide from the mourning crowds, a veil for his true emotions. And the warmth of a cape like that is almost reminiscent of an actual enveloping hug, using it as kind of like a nurturing crutch. This also then gives a double meaning to the black of the cape, showcasing that he's not only mourning the loss of his mother, but also the loss of the comfort he'll ever receive. So it's kind of a selfish action within a selfless one, essentially. I'm not entirely sure how to phrase that, but I hope you understand what I mean. I would like to mention the fact that the red first presents itself as a necktie, I think is quite indicative of Victor having this as a constant reminder. You know, it's around his neck, it's got him in a chokehold, as to, like, per se, that he was at the time completely unable to save his mother, and it's kind of a permanent reminder to him that, you know, no matter what I do, if I'm going to be able to create life or advance medicine or, you know, surgery in any way, shape or form, he's doing it for her. The fact that he then takes on the red is a way of, like, continuing her legacy and ensuring that, like, her death wasn't in vain, so to speak. It hangs itself around his neck much like a noose. It is that permanent weight and permanent reminder of his failures and how he now has no option but to succeed. Which I think is quite interesting. I really, really like this angle that they took with Victor. A lot of people didn't really like this interpretation of Victor because, you know, in the books he's meant to be a lot younger. In the book, there's only one. In the book he's meant to be a lot younger and a lot more, you know, aloof and uncouth and so on and so forth. But no, I think I really like this older version of Victor. I'd also like to note that from this point forward, from his mother's funeral scene onward, his palette, like his general palette, gets a lot darker. You will not see him in a completely white outfit again for the entire film. You just won't see it. He is no longer this, you know, innocent child. He's felt the perils of loss. He understands what it's like to be left completely alone in the world from such a young age as well. And to see this kind of parental neglect, I should say, because William as a child is a lot more, you know, he's much more akin to his father. He looks like his father because he's being raised by his father. He acts a lot more like him as well. So his dad is always, you know, focusing much more of his energy into William. And also inadvertently, once again, with the blue and red parallel, he's, you know, making him into like a mini version of him, which as a parent, that's all you can really do. But have to, constantly neglect one to kind of succeed with another is a little bit hypocritical, if you will. And a lot more black presents itself as well. With a darker palette, you're going to get black. But when it comes to Victor, it feels so indicative of him, like, never leaving his grieving process. He never quite gets over the death of his mother, and it's kind of a looming presence in his life. When the time inevitably came for Leopold, Victor's father, he doesn't have nearly the same, from an acting standpoint and from a colouring standpoint, he doesn't have nearly the same reaction. He is a lot colder, a lot more, reserved about it, because, his father's death was never going to have the same impact as his mother's did, because his father was quite neglectful to him his whole life. So when he's gone to his father's funeral, when he's had to put the faceplate down on him, you see, like, the very first thing you see is red gloves, because once again he's wearing, I don't think it's his mother's red gloves at this point. I think it is just a pair of gloves that he had, once again in red, because he's still, I suppose, the vessel for her message, quote unquote. But he's kind of like the vessel for her. He is, Leopold could have tried to have buried her and forgotten about her, but that was never going to be something that was just going to happen. Not when Victor was around, when Victor was, once again, the spitting image of his mother. So I think the best way I can describe Victor's mother, despite having such a small role in the film, it's very much like a haunting of the narrative. Everything he does, well, not everything he does, but majority of what he does is pushed by his relationship with his mother and his obsession with creating life. Claire truly lives on in Victor's image, and this evidently gives him a sense of entitlement to the roles that a traditional man cannot realistically fulfill. So it's almost as if he's entitling himself to the roles of womanhood, cheating the system and creating life, which is reflected in a few ways, but it's especially with his very odd obsession with milk. Like, that is the only beverage you'll see him drink throughout the entire film, which is very reminiscent of his regression to an infant-like state. As, babies can't drink anything but milk for the first few months of life. It will literally kill them. Much like Victor, who drinks nothing but milk the entire film. It's just that level of entitlement within Victor showcasing itself again, showing that even though he did have somewhat of a loving relationship with his mother, that's still not enough to kind of stop him from transforming into a traditional man of the time. I would also like to mention how this same red that is shown in his gloves is reflected in his surgical bag. The inside is kind of that, what's the material, kind of like a crushed velvet almost, inside of a most likely mahogany wooden box, which is once again indicative of Victor's family's wealth, like his mother's estate and plantations and whatnot. The smallest details of his outfit will constantly remind you of this. He's always wearing, he's got velvets, he's got leather, he's got silks, so on and so forth. It's always reminding you of, how he's a poor tormented soul, but he's a rich, poor tormented soul. One thing I would like to highlight about kind of the film as a whole is every single character's innate ability to stand out in a crowd. It's like they could be wearing something that's exactly the same, but it's the colours that are used in their outfits. I think that's why it's so important, especially in films like this, for most characters, and most important characters, I should say, to have their kind of signature colours. So obviously with Victor, it's red, but it's rare for him to wear a fully red outfit. But you'll know that seeing a sliver of red anywhere, really, it's Victor, it's him. You can see the glimpse of the scarf, you can see his gloves from anywhere. It makes it so easy to identify. And I think that's like some really masterful costume creation, because having, even just the smallest little modicum of a colour, you immediately know what character it is, and you associate it with them, regardless of whether or not it's been made explicitly clear, is, mastery at work. It is phenomenal. So, yeah, once again, Kate Hawley, love you, girl. You did fantastic. Yeah. And it's like, even just the costuming of the film and everything, and kind of, like I've said before, but how each character's colours kind of bleed into one another. You see it, especially, this is another point I'm going to go a bit further into soon, but you see it especially with Elizabeth and Victor, kind of how they, like, they parallel each other. That's the point. You have the red and the green, but they do slowly start to morph between one another, and I think that is, you know, based on how their relationship is going, it's very clever. Very, 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 very clever. I love it. And I think it is very clever because it's once again reflective of his he's got quite a flamboyant nature, you know. He's not your typical your typical mad scientist, quote unquote, I should say, with the white lab coat and their massive glasses and the crazy hair. He's a lot more dignified than that. And it's like, yes, he is kind of an insane person, but he does it with style, you know. He's never the one to be a wallflower. You always notice him wherever he is, and that is once again reflective of not only the colours but the costume design. And I just think, yeah, it's like, you know, when you have so many thoughts you can't quite articulate yourself, which is so annoying, because like I'm sitting here making a video about this and I can't even articulate what I'm trying to say. Bear with me, please. Patience. I promise it gets good, I promise. Now, I know I have reiterated several times now that red is Victor's colour, you know. You won't really see anyone else wearing it, but it's important to note that he doesn't wear it in every single scene, and usually it's just like, you know, you can have the main motif be missing from one or two scenes. It's not a big deal, but I think when it comes to this film, especially with his relationship with Elizabeth, it is so important to notice when he's not wearing red, because it means something, you know. So I've got 3 main examples that I noticed that, you know, kind of highlight why he's not wearing the red and how what it means in that moment of the film. So the first scene I would like to talk about is the scene in the gardens when she's chasing butterflies. You know, she's donning this yellow dress. It's like a yellowy, greeny kind of dress. And he doesn't have his necktie. He doesn't have his necktie, and he's not wearing his gloves either, which is really important, because it's as if, you know, once again, because the red is so tied to his mother, and he sees his mother so much in Elizabeth, because they're played by the same actress, but because he's trying so hard to kind of not necessarily project onto her, he's not trying to make her into something that she's not, but he's trying to appeal to her, because, you know, from their very first interaction in the town square, she did not like him. She does not like him whatsoever, and I really don't blame her. I'm going to be so honest, I don't blame her whatsoever, but she does not like him. He, however, is somewhat obsessed with her, so he's trying everything that he can to, you know, find ways to appeal to her, and if that means that he kind of has to let himself go and subsequently his mother go to kind of get what he wants, he's willing to do so. He's willing to lie and conceal and pretend. So I wrote it in the notes, and it sounds a lot better in the notes, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. He's trying to appear softer and more human to appeal to her nature, and she's already undertaking her own metamorphosis, his way of life slowly leaking into her own posterior. Sorry, I read that quite fast. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'll go into much more depth about it in the actual Elizabeth video, but from their second interaction, when he's kind of following her through, when he's looking for cadavers of men, like of criminals that are going to be hung, and he sees her in the town centre, and he kind of follows her to this confessional booth because, you know, she wants to go and confess.
I actually got this wrong. Their first
he thinks he's slick. He goes
in town
into the
square
priest
after Vic
spot,
was scouting,
and he's like,
for
"Oh, how can I help you, my child?" Obviously, she knows it's him. She's messing with him. But they have this scene together where they go and they dance. They're like, I'm not actually quite sure what that was, but there's like a little ball, like a mini little ball that's happening, and they go and dance together. From that point forward, whenever they're alone together, her palette, like her outfits, become warmer and warmer, because her whole thing is that she's green and blue, like green, teal and blue really, but it's mostly green. But from that point forward, whenever they're alone together, her palette gets warmer and warmer. She progresses. She goes from yellow, and then when they're back together with Harlander, she's blue again. And then in kind of like the pre-climax to their relationship, in the scene in the pre-climax, she's wearing a red dress, you know. It's kind of, he's projecting onto her, and she's not quite as free as she wishes she was, and it's reflected in her outfits. She's, I don't want to say succumbing to his wiles, because that's not true, but it is a matter of melding and bending to the will of Victor, whether she likes it or not. But it's important to know, after that scene is done, after she has rejected him, after he's tried to make a move on her for the umpteenth time, and he's rejected her, and she's rejected him rather for the umpteenth time, she goes back to her own palace. She is once again her own woman. I'll go into more detail in her designated video, but I want to go into a little bit more depth as to why Elizabeth becomes warmer in palate. Even though she knows that Victor wants to pursue her in a romantic fashion, she seems to be under the impression that he would still be willing to bury his feelings for a chance at genuine friendship, one of scientific discovery and collaboration. And so when the time comes for his romantic betrayal, when he confesses to her again, when she's in her red dress, that's kind of what triggers her resignation back into her own palette, still somewhat showcasing that she isn't as free-spirited as she yearns to be, purely because she is a woman. And never once is the same thing kind of presented with William, because William and Elizabeth's relationship isn't exactly, it's not shown as much, because it doesn't need to be shown as much, because it doesn't matter as much to the story, if you see what I mean. But yeah, side tangent over. I promise there will be a video on Elizabeth, and it will go very in-depth on Elizabeth, because it's very, very necessary. So, as I mentioned before, Victor, it's very, very rare that he will wear a completely red outfit, and there is one scene in particular where he does. It's the scene where he and Harlander have kind of like the first splinters in their relationship. You see that things are slightly going wrong. It showcases how opposing their views and beliefs truly are. I'll speak about this a bit more in depth, once again, in the Harlander and William video. But Harlander and Leopold, Victor's father, they have the exact same palette, and they have their very deep crushed blues. They're meant to be quite regal. They are shown to be men of stature. Having that kind of palette, that's, immediately, they are men of stature, they are men of power. So I feel like the fact that Harlander and Leopold have such similar palettes is quite a testament to Harlander and Victor's relationship, and it kind of showcases how purely symbiotic it is. They're both using each other to reach a greater end. Victor is using Harlander to get money, space, time, and resources to kind of conduct his experiments, and Harlander's using Victor. He's saying, I've given you all this money, I've given you all this time, I've given you everything you've asked for. You need to have finished this, because unbeknownst to everyone, he is battling syphilis, and he's going to die from syphilis if Victor doesn't find, a cure, quote unquote. But Victor can't find a cure for something he doesn't know he's battling, if you see what I mean. Which is why I feel like their relationship splinters and fractures and absolutely breaks the way it does, because they are, they're both using each other to an end where neither of them really know, how it's all going to culminate. And these parallels, the colour parallels with Harlander and Leopold, kind of also show why Victor latched onto him so quickly as well, and so easily, because he seems to be getting the praise from a father figure that is so, reminiscent of his actual father, without needing his actual dad to do so. Harlander's failure to disclose his syphilis diagnosis to Victor until the very last second, and the irrational expectation of Victor to find a solution within his outlandish experiments, is such a clear sign of arrogance, which is once again perfectly mirrored by Leopold, and also untethered hope. And that hope is very quickly dashed once he realizes that Victor has no intentions of helping. Because, realistically, why would he? At that point, he'd spent like months trying to build this guy. To remove the brain from the body and just plop it into a new and plop it into somewhere else, it's not an easy feat. But yeah, once Harlander kind of realizes that Victor has no intentions of helping him, he immediately tries to sabotage Victor's, his entire experiment. It's very much the mentality of, if I can't have it, then no one can. And that is once again later mirrored by Victor in a much more violent way. It presents itself in Victor, but it still appears. And that could tie into him seeing much more of his father within Harlander, reflective of, that both of them having such a deep blue palettes, unconsciously mirroring his actions as a young child would do with their own parents. This also showcases the same blatant disregard that they both have towards the gift that is life. Victor tries to recreate it in the most inhumane and unorthodox ways, while Harlander actively profits off of the deaths of innocent soldiers and the continuation. One thing that I would like to mention that I failed to mention previously was kind of Victor's usage of white, like white clothes, white anything. It is rare for him to wear white in this film and for it to remain unstained. It's like, at the beginning, as a child with his mother, she stains him with blood, like with her blood, so his white outfit becomes dirtied and muddied with blood. As he's kind of progressing through his creation of the creature, through his dissections and his like visitations to war grounds, all of his clothes become dirtied one way or another, some by actual dirt, majority of it by blood. When he's working on the creature, when he's in his laboratory and he's working, he's wearing a white apron, but that still becomes dirtied by blood. It's like his shirt he wears underneath, dirtied with blood. In the climax of the film, at the very end, he's wearing his white wedding tux to obviously his brother's wedding, dirtied with blood. It's very much a recurring theme. And I quite appreciate how they gave Victor the colour of red, because obviously, blood is red. To me, it kind of shows, or it gives a very strong sense that anytime anyone on screen bleeds, Victor has had somewhat of an active hand in their suffering, either inadvertently or, blatantly. And at almost every point in the film when someone else bleeds, he's always around, he's always present. A majority of the time, it's inflicted by him or his creation. However, the only time he bleeds is at the hands of that same creation, of the creature, or his own selfish actions and his lack of foresight. After the altercation between Harlander and Victor, he goes back to his laboratory and he continues building the creature. And I think it's quite important to note that from him leaving Harlander's kind of estate, going back to his laboratory, building the creature, doing the inadvertently killing Harlander, doing the kind of scientific experiment with the lightning and whatnot, thinking he's failed, going to bed, waking up and experiencing the creature, all of that is done in one outfit. It's the same outfit he wore during the altercation with Harlander. He's just stripped himself of his blazer. He's in his shirt, he's in his, kind of butcher's apron. He's wearing those same like coppery red trousers. Once again, very, very, it really reminds me of Dried Blood, that outfit. The coppery red is like, it's kind of, like it looks like you can grind it between your fingers. It's very, very, very reminiscent of Dried Blood to me. And in that scene, obviously he's got his red surgical gloves as well. It's just so, like, you can tell he's just driven by so much rage and so much, passion, which, all of those are all subsidiaries of the colour red when you think of connotations of the colour red. You have love, you have rage, you have passion. It's very much like, it's an intense colour. And Victor in and of himself is very much an intense character. He is very, 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 very passionate about what he does. And he's very, 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 he's adamant to get to the point he wants. And he's willing to do anything to get to there. He's willing to kind of schmooze with people he wouldn't necessarily interact with on any other given day. And it's the way that I understand it, the whole thing of having like a coppery red instead of a very much like a blood red, is that he's kind of not necessarily forgiving himself, but he's kind of like, he's letting the memories fade. He's letting the memories of his mother fade. He's kind of like finally getting over it, I want to say, quote unquote, because, fresh blood and dried blood, they do not look the same. They are very, very, very different. And I think him wearing those kind of coppery trousers, it's more of a thing of like, I'm letting this go because I'm on the verge of something great. I'm on the verge of completing my life's work, and therefore I don't have to have this weight hanging over me anymore, because I'm about to, this is my magnum opus. This will be my not final creation, but this will be my ultimate creation. And so, when you've got him out there, he's climbing up that spire, he's got his little thingy, little electrical thingy, I can't remember what it's called. It reminds me of it very much reminds me of a speculum, which is a tool in that it's a tool that gynecologists use for when they're giving a pap smear, or when anyone with the vagina is going through a somewhat of a routine checkup. And like, that's a whole nother lot of imagery in and of itself. I could have a whole nother 20-minute spiel talking about the imagery of that scene alone. But yeah, it very much reminds me of a speculum. Yes. When he's gone up, he's kind of set everything that he needs in flow to create the creature, and then thinks that he's failed because it doesn't come to life immediately, And you've got your massive batteries in the background, both of which are red and green. There's another. It all comes full circle. The creature is given life through a mechanism that is very reminiscent of a speculum, a device that has caused nothing but pain for women for hundreds of years. And that inflicted pain still being caused to this very day when it has no reason to be. He is birthed through the pain of those that Victor has very blatantly forsaken, skipping the quote-unquote natural ecological steps and manufacturing a man built of nothing but the desecrated corpses of innocent men. They, once again, did not consent to this and therefore are somewhat absolved of the blame. The trousers being bleached and becoming a lot more copper-like, much like dried blood, but the gloves remaining their same bloody red brings new connotations. The gloves have never represented the metaphorical blood on his hands more than now, and the copper indicates him finally progressing into his own person, no longer hiding in the past under the guise of his mother, and instead stepping into a new person. The fact that they're bleach stained could also indicate how he's trying to cleanse himself of his past being, not to be weighed down by his previous misdeeds and instead hailed as a new messiah. Yeah, when I think of the speculum, it reminds me back to this argument that I saw, not argument, but it reminds me to this point that I saw someone on Twitter make a while ago, and if I find the tweet, I'll put it up, but it was basically saying that Victor isn't a bad father in this film, he's a bad mother. It's such a good point. It's like, Victor, in kind of building the creature, he's somewhat given birth, he has given birth to this creature. It's not in the traditional sense, but he's given life to something that to many pieces of something that used to have life, but he's kind of taken them and amalgamated them all into one being, one creature, which is a new being. So in his kind of endless quest of trying to achieve these things, he has somewhat given birth. Like, Victor's a man. He is a man who was so obsessed with creating life that he has now gone on to have a son in quite literally the opposite of the traditional way. The complete opposite. You cannot build a person, and, well, he can, but you cannot build a person and then choose to neglect them in the same vein that he did and not expect terrible results. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. So, once he has, he's finished his whole experiment, the lightning has struck, it's hit the speculum-looking device, it's hit the creature, sent sparks flying everywhere. Victor goes up to the creature, once again with his red surgical gloves, and listens for a heartbeat. There is no heartbeat. He is once again full of rage, and this is the first time you kind of see him indulge in that rage a little bit, where he just goes ballistic on the body. And I do like this behind the scenes detail where that's not Jacob Elordi, that's the stunt double, because Jacob Elordi couldn't handle Oscar Isaac beating him like that, which I find quite funny. But yeah, and so obviously he's now distraught, he's shedding his shirt and whatnot, and he's going to bed in nothing but red clothing. He keeps his gloves, he keeps his trousers, and that's it. Once again, because he was so angry, it feels very much like, he is just full of rage. And this is, I think, one of the points in the film where the metaphor of the red gloves being blood on his hands is the most apparent, It's like he has now just taken all of these dead bodies and sewn them together into one monstrosity. And to his knowledge, it hasn't worked. it's been all for nothing. So now he has, despite not being the reason that these men have died, he still has their blood on his hands. He has desecrated their corpses when they could have been laid to peace with their families and whatnot, and just been left to, rest in peace for the rest of time. He has like shoved them all non-consensually, because the creature didn't consent to be created, but these men didn't consent to having their body parts being taken and put into this, this random creature. So he has so much blood on his hands at this point, whether or not he realizes it. And I think that is just so, I love that parallel. I think it's fantastic. As said many a time, Victor shedding the gloves that visually connect him with his abundance of misdeeds are a way of showing himself in his purest form, but the room decor very much betrays this notion. The canopy drapes over his bed are a deep red, with a very white interior representing his unconscious innocence and guarded exterior. And then you have, once again, the sturdy mahogany of the bed frame reiterates the wealth of not only Harlander, but also Victor. At this point they had the relationship of what's mine is yours, very much with the symbiotic relationship. So when we next see Victor, he has had a lovely night's sleep. And he awakes to find the creature standing at the end of his bed. Obviously, absolutely terrified. I would be too. Oh my god, what do you mean the man I just built is actually a man and he got up and he walked around and he's real? I would be petrified. So Victor, obviously, very fearful. He's gasped. He's kind of covered himself with his red silk/satin bed sheets. He is fearful. He's scared. He gets up, because the creature at this point is inquisitive. It doesn't know anything. It's learning as it's going along, and it's sought out the only other person in the house, which just so happens to be Victor. And so as Victor's introducing himself, obviously, he has that one part where he takes off the gloves, which is him, based on that metaphor I just said before, completely disregarding that. Get rid of it, throw it out the window. It's gone. Because, as far as he's concerned, that doesn't matter now because he succeeded. He has built a man out of the cadavers of all these other people who, unfortunately lost their lives in war. That doesn't matter anymore. He's done what he needed to do. He has built life. He has built a new man from the bodies, and, it's his own independent being. So as he takes off the gloves, he's kind of, he offers his hand. He's showing the creature, I am human. I'm not the monster they make me out to be. I'm not the evil that they make me out to be. And that in and of itself is already interesting enough. It's like, he makes the choice to absolve himself of any misdeeds that he has committed in the past, because as far as he's concerned now, those don't matter anymore. He has succeeded in his life's mission, and that's all that matters. In that same vein, however, Victor taking off his gloves to meet the creature is the same as the act of stripping himself to his most bare and authentic, because as we all know, he got his red from his mother, as I've said many a time in this video. But kind of him taking that offer from himself, he's kind of showing it's not Victor the boy who lost his mother, or Victor the boy who was neglected by his father, or Victor the man, the crazed man who wanted to build life from cadavers. He is just Victor, He's kind of showing his most innocent and authentic form to the creature, whether or not that's positive or negative, that's, I guess, up to the viewer to decide. But, it's in that same vein, in the same scene where he teaches the creature, he opens the curtains and immediately is afraid of the sun. He's like, no, sun is life, basking in that kind of warm glow, making him seem like, when you're out in the sun, you feel more quote unquote human. It bathes you in that warm light. So in this vein, he's seeming more like I said, his most authentic, I suppose. Which is then immediately juxtaposed by him taking the creature down to the basement and locking him there, how cruel is, sorry, I know this is meant to be about colour and whatnot, but how cruel is that to create a creature that evidently knows nothing, it's learning everything, tell him that the sun is life and that this is what you should seek, and then immediately lock him down in the basement. That is, with the most artificial lighting ever, might I add. It's when I get to the creatures segment, I will talk more about lighting, because at least from my what I've found about this film and from my interpretation of it is that when it comes to the color of the creature, the lighting is the most important thing. It is the most important. And it's like, you know, maybe I am just an English nerd who's reading too far into these things, but, you know, you wouldn't be watching this video if you weren't either. So back to the point at hand, it's Victor stripping himself to his most authentic. What that means for the relationship between him and the creature, you know, it's up for you to decide, I suppose. Also, just quickly, before I move on, I've just rewatched the scene of when Victor and the creature first encounter each other. And I do have to say, I thought it was quite interesting in which when Victor takes off his gloves, his fingers are still bloodstained, just at the very, very, very end. And I remember when I saw this in cinema, and I just thought I was going insane. I just thought I was a crazy person. But no, when if I can put a clip, I will. When he first takes off the gloves, his fingers, just at the very, very tips, are still stained in red. I suppose it's just related to how much he has kind of pillaged and I don't want to say squandered, but how much he has taken from all these different bodies and put into his ultimate creation. It's staining him. It's like, even though he could have washed his hands, he could have, well, you don't know if he washed his hands, but it's most likely he did. He is a scientist after all. He washed his hands and he's trying to wash himself of it. It's still staining, you know. It's whether or not that's kind of conveyed through his clothing or through the blood in his fingers or just how he is, it's forever stained him. There's no going back from here. This is going to be a permanent facet to the rest of his life, you know. And it might not have been intentional, because I know that on film sets a lot of fake blood, it does tend to stain, so that might have just been like an unintentional thing. But you know, the joys of people like me is that we read too far into these things, and that's the takeaway I'm taking from this. As Victor leads the creature down to the basement, when he's kind of shackling him to the table, I thought it was important to note that he gives the creature a blanket, you know, to keep it warm, because, you know, despite being a creation, he is still human. You know, he knows he needs to give it these certain things for it to survive. But it is the red blanket that's off his bed. And one thing it happens too much for it to be unintentional, rather. But so I need to finish reading the art book, but the blanket that he gives the creature is off of his bed, so it's another red one. And that to me feels like he's kind of shrouding him, because at this moment Victor is all he knows. You know, he knows Victor, he knows the bedroom, and he knows the basement. That's all the creature knows. So I think him giving him a red blanket is kind of shrouding him in, not necessarily you belong to me, but you are a subsidiary of me, and therefore, you know, if I'm going to dress you, you're going to be like me. For me it's the same as Victor's father and William. You know, despite William wearing, at least in his childhood, wearing brighter versions of the blue, he is still blue. He is still a direct subsidiary of his father. He's trying to make him exactly the same, you know. I feel like that's just a really nice parallel that I've only just now realised, but I think it's really nice. It could also be seen as both Victor and Leopold failing to consider their children as children, and instead pawns to whatever plans they're going to want to instill. Viewing them as property to be owned and claimed raised through somewhat of an inhumane way. This then parallels Elizabeth's relationship with Victor, with him failing on several occasions to view her as a truly free person, instead only imagining what she could do for him and how she could serve and provide for him, you know, which is something she'd obviously never do despite the quote-unquote rules of the time. When Elizabeth and William meet the creature for the first time, Victor is still in the same outfit, in the same blouse and copper red trousers that have been, you know, somewhat dirtied. It's been at least like a few weeks at this point, maybe like 2 weeks, maybe a week, I don't know. Judging on how long the creature's hair has grown, I would say it's about maybe 2 weeks or so since his conception, and you can really see Victor's patience starting to wane very quickly. So it's quite an interesting dynamic between the two of them, but colour-wise there isn't a whole lot to say. So I will move on to, I think this is probably one of my favourite scenes in the whole film. The argument between Victor and Elizabeth on the stairs at night time after she's gone to go see the creature. And they are arguing about, you know, what he's done and how he plans to nurture this this creature and teach him and, you know, show him how to live as he goes forward. And it's like in a line that Victor had said earlier, you know, he hadn't thought what would come after creation. He had no intention of actually having to, you know, teach this creature and show him how to live. I think in his head, the way he saw it was that if he was made of the bodies of grown men, he would have the knowledge of these grown men. Thematically, when I look at the colours of this scene, I think it is just phenomenal, because, you know, Victor's wearing this teal robe, like this teal, like silk robe, but it's got red inner lining, and I think, you know, I think this is quite one of the most on the nose pieces of clothing in the film, because he's standing there with Elizabeth. This is like his final appeal to her, and he's like, you know I've made mistakes, I know I've done this wrong and that wrong and blah 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 blah, but, you know, I've made this creature, he's here now, this could lead on to bigger and better things. And she's like, you know, there's no point in you trying to do bigger and better things if you can't even nurture and teach the first thing that you've created. And it's like, you're too impatient, you know, you want final results and you're not willing to spend the time to get those results. It's very bang 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 bang. And, you know, she knows that you cannot live like that. You can't, you know, you can't abandon what you've created just because it doesn't deliver on your expectations first try. Because, you know, if he were the size of a baby, you would expect him to be the way he is, because you've only taught him, or you've tried to teach him through rage and through impatience. That's not how he learns. He learned your name. Sorry, I'm speaking as if I was Elizabeth right now. But he learned the name of Victor because you spoke it to him with respect and love. You know, you gave him the time and the patience to learn how to say your name. That's why he learned how to say Elizabeth so quickly. And yeah, you know, obviously he doesn't like that. He's not a fan of that. So, like I was saying, the one thing I really do appreciate about that scene is the kind of appeal that, you know, he goes to her and she's, you know, she's just kind of ripping him a new one. She's like, you're too impatient, you're not willing to wait, you're not willing to teach. He's like, no, something must have went wrong. And she's like, how could you possibly know that if you're not patient enough to find that out? And he's like, oh, but you've denied me of my heart, or something along those lines. And she's like, listen, bruv, like, nothing I'm saying is revolutionary. Like, all of these things were kind of pre-planned, and that is your dilemma. But I do enjoy that is your, you know, seeing how much I notice. That's what's getting lost in translation between people notice, and how that kind of changes your views of the film. You don't have that understanding, and yeah. And from that, obviously, he gets with this film, right? It's just so good. The kind of red. That's when you start to see it become more apparent in the robe. It's like he knows he's lost the appeal. He's showing his true colours again. And through those true colours, the biggest connotation of that is rage. He is pissed. He is pissed with Elizabeth. He's pissed with the creature. He's pissed with both of them for the same reason as well. He's annoyed that the creature has found a way to appeal to Elizabeth in a way he never could. And he's annoyed that Elizabeth has given the creature the time of day that she won't give him. But he's failing to understand why those two have found such common ground with each other. And it's just so... yeah, it's like it starts to blow out further and further the angrier he gets. Obviously, after Elizabeth has departed, she didn't want any part of this. So he's now gone down to the creature and he's, you know, shouting at it, hitting it, abusive, you know, abusive man. From a behavioural standpoint, Victor has done nothing but perpetuate the cycle of abuse that began with his father. His immediate frustration with the lack of results from the creature, only drawn out through the cognitive nurturing from Elizabeth, mirrors Leopold's frustrations towards Claire and Victor perfectly. The utilisation of green on Victor during these scenes could also be perceived as his attempt at tarnishing Elizabeth and her ideals in the eyes of the creature, weaponising the only comfort he's ever felt. She is the only other character to wear green around the creature at any time, so we can assume that he finds comfort in her signature colour. So Victor coming in and immediately leading with anger and violence only tarnishes her goodwill even further, forcing the creature to associate his familiarities and reassurance with pain solely through the usage of colour. Victor covers himself with the robe as an act of modesty, aware enough to not expose too much of himself to Elizabeth, both by body and by his true natures, despite their argument. But as this altercation continues, he doesn't even award her that. This could have been because of his anger, he simply doesn't care anymore, or a bit more nefarious, a conceited way of asserting his quote unquote manly dominance over her, sorry, knowing that his masculinity would trump anything she has to say. Despite how hard he tries to be different, he's the same as the other brutish men she is shown to hate. And it's in this same scene where we see the creature kind of indulge in that same rage that he's been taught from Victor, and Victor kind of recoiling in fear, because of course you would, this is like a 7 foot tall guy that you made in your attic that is unreasonably strong, that you have done nothing but abuse, but are then confused when he comes back angry. Let's make it make sense, shall we? Let's make it make sense. But that's besides the point. And yeah, just seeing, he's kind of at this point, I think he's beginning to understand how his actions are reflecting in the creature, and therefore, the creature's behavior towards him. And I think this is one of those ones where, indicative of the outfit, deep down he knows Elizabeth is right, but he refuses to admit to it because, how could the great Victor Frankenstein be wrong? How could this random girl, whose main area of expertise is the biology of bugs and little critters and creatures, be, how could she be more knowledgeable about his creation than he is? But it's like he either fails to understand or refuses to understand that it's not about, it's not about the science of it, it's about the human nature. You've made a person, it has human nature. And yeah, listen, you know what, like I said at the beginning, this is about colours, and it slowly delves into something else. I would love to do a story analysis video of this film one day. It will be 3 hours long. But you know what, if there's an audience for it, if people want to watch this, if you want to listen to me yap about Frankenstein for a bit longer, I am more than happy to oblige. And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of it for this scene. Sorry, I've gone on for a while about this scene, but I think it's my favourite scene in the entire film. One more point, I promise this is the last point for this scene. But I'd also like to mention that Victor donning green could be a visual representation of the jealousy he feels towards the relationship between Elizabeth and the creature. They've got what he wants, and it's such a driving force behind why he does what he does to the both of them. The kind of parallel between the green and the red, it's kind of like whatever emotion he's presenting at the time when he is fully green, when he's covering himself with Elizabeth, it's obvious that he's very jealous. When he's with the creature, he's not quite as conservative, so the robe does fly open at some points, showcasing the anger that he has inside. So not only is he jealous, but he's angry with the creature, and that is made apparent through the colours of the robe. And yeah. In the morning after the previous scene with Victor and Elizabeth, he's now essentially reached his breaking point. He's doing everything he can to usher William and Elizabeth out of his manor. He's like, you need to go take her to Vienna, after he lied about Harlander being killed by the creature, but showing Harlander's dead body to William. Elizabeth never finds this out, by the way. That's one thing that, as I was, rewatching the film and writing notes for this, I realised she never finds out that Harlander died. Or at least if she does, she never finds out the truth about it. And I don't think they explicitly say it. Yeah, I don't think they do. I don't think she ever finds out. If she does, it's implied. But also, just a little side note I want to make. Victor's a bad person, guys. You hear a lot of people talking about when Victor blames the creature for Elizabeth's death, right? Not enough. I don't think I've seen anyone talk about how he also blames the creature for Harlander's death. He's using the creature as a scapegoat to kind of erase the blood from his hands of two of the people who are closest to him, which is why it's kind of ironic that in the end the creature does actually kill the one person that Victor kind of claims to be closest to. He always, whenever he talks about his brother, he always talks about, I love him with all of my heart, he is, we are blood, we are family. It's just a bit of dramatic irony, in my favourite piece of South London slang, you got his lick back. Simple as, you know, you've blamed me for the killing of essentially a business partner. You've blamed me for the killing of your business partner. You've blamed me for the killing of the woman that you want. The creature is absolved of blame for this because he had nothing to do with either of those. So when he does go and kill the one person that Victor claims to love the most, you know, that feels like the real breaking point between the two of them. But yeah, now at his breaking point, Victor, he's kind of regressed clothing wise and color wise, I want to say. He's now dressed in an entirely black and white outfit, black blazer, black trousers, and white shirt. As if he's kind of mourning the relationship that he could have had with Elizabeth. But I put could have had in quotations because, you know, as she's made it explicitly clear, nothing was ever going to happen between the two of them. She just didn't like him like that. And he gave her no reason for her to like him, especially after he confessed to her, she left. He then went to create a creature. She resonated with that creature. He confessed again and then proceeded to abuse that creature in front of her, despite her saying, you know, treat him with love, kindness and care and you'll get the results that you want. He's entered this mourning period over what he could have had, even though he never could have had it in the first place. And it kind of counts, or it doesn't count, but I kind of see it as like this massive mental break for him. He's just had enough, you know. Everything, like he should have gotten all these different accolades in his mind. In the way he sees it, he should have gotten all these different accolades and everyone should have been rushing to him. Elizabeth should have wanted him. William should have been like, wow, you're such a visionary. This is like, I love being your brother. You're so cool. And the creature should have been like a scholar, even though he was built off the corpses of men who died in war, majority of whom weren't noble. They were just like, you know, regular men, so they wouldn't have had the sense of like that knowledge that he does anyway. So even if he was asking for a lot, even if it went perfectly, it still wouldn't have been good enough for him, so we still would have ended up in this same boat anyways. Anywho, yeah, now at his breaking point, after his umpteenth rejection from Elizabeth and frustrated with the creature, donning a mostly black outfit, Victor makes the irrational choice to burn his laboratory down with the creature inside. So once again, the Black calls back to his mourning clothing from period, torn over the death of his mother, instead mourning the relationship that he could have had with Elizabeth had she been more obedient to his kind of rulings. Despite being shown as quite progressive for the time, Victor still falls victim to the misogynistic tendencies of his peers. The very notion of Elizabeth being her own woman and having the resilience to not only make her own choices but stand by them appears to slightly threaten him, and her stubborn rejections only make him all the more angry. Yeah, so Victor's kind of Oedipus-like a relationship with Elizabeth because obviously she reminds him of his mother so much. Yeah, mourning what once could have been, mourning what has gone, you know. He's just not in a great place right now. He's really, really not. So, yeah, and I would just like to say, I think the whole having him in black in this scene really, really works because his main motif has been red throughout the entire film. So having him red with rage, because you know that's like a common phrase, it wouldn't have been as impactful. The fact that he's shrouded in complete black, it's like he's unpredictable. You really don't know what he's going to do. So when he's going around with the gas canisters and whatnot, throwing them everywhere, leaving all of his research behind, all of the resources that Highlander spent loads of money into for him, and it's all now going to waste because, you know, he's throwing a tantrum because he can't have what he believes he should. And, you know, obviously he goes through with it. He goes through with blowing up the laboratory and whatnot. Here's the creature screaming for him in the basement, because of course he would be. Why would, you know, you've made life and now what, 3 weeks later you're trying to kill it alone with fire. The one thing you taught it to fear, you taught him to fear fire, because, you know, when he's leading him down, he's holding the candelabra away from him. Like, that's barbaric. That's horrific. And yeah, him trying to turn around and go back for him, I think, is a sense of an unreliable narrator. Like, at the top of the film, he says to the ship's captain, he's like, you know, what was it? Some of this is fact, all of this is true. So, all of the story that he tells, everything that he's telling is technically what happened, but you can fabricate and you can make up little lies to make yourself seem better. Like what he just said about Harlander, which is saying the creature killed Harlander in a fit of rage, even though Harlander died before the creature even had the chance to come to life, And yeah, I think it's a sense of an unreliable narrator. And I think that's the same as with some of his relationship with Elizabeth before they have their massive falling out. I think Victor is a very unreliable narrator, but I think that makes the film more interesting. I really do. I'm actually going to slightly rescind this statement about the creature and the unreliable narrator. I've seen online that a few people have been sharing segments of the complete screenplay, showing like screenshots of cutscenes and whatnot. And in a bit of cut dialogue, Victor gives the creature an opportunity to save himself, and when he inevitably fails, he apologizes to him, promising that his demise will be quick, a conscious piece of humanity shining through his unbridled rage. This proves that he does actually take Elizabeth's advice, but only utilizes it in what he believes to be the creature's last few moments alive, only granting him humanity in the face of death, a sentiment that is flipped at the end of the film. That was a lot. That was a lot talking about nothing, really. That was a lot talking. I hope you're all still with me. Thank you for being here, by the way. I really appreciate this. This film has absolutely rotted my brain to the core. It feels like it's in my bloodstream now. It is such a good film. Guillermo del Toro. Yeah. It's like, I'll save my sentiments for the end. You're not going to have to sit through all of that right now. That's unfair to put it in the middle of the video. But it's just masterful in every way. In a nice parallel to the previous scene that we see Victor in, at this point in the film, we don't see Victor for a while. That's the end of his story, and then the creature comes in and tells his part of the story. So obviously we have to deal with the creature finding the old man, living in the walls of the barn, finding his friend, discovering who he is, how he was made, that very depressing ending to the old man, his only friend. After all of that, we see Victor again. And he is now, like I said, in a nice parallel to his previous scene where he's dressed in all black and going insane, he is now dressed in a white tux, white blazer, white tux, black trousers, because it is now William and Elizabeth's wedding day. This can only go terribly. So, yeah, it's a steep parallel, a yin and yang moment, if you will, to him before. He's now, he's a lot more mellow. He is a bit more self-reflective. Not quite yet forgiving. But, he's kind of had that moment of... Because, he lost his leg in the explosion. He's like, damn, I messed up. I messed up big time. But he wasn't expecting, he was expecting to just live the rest of his life as a failed scientist, as someone who, tried to play God, messed up, learned the lesson and moved on with his life. He wasn't expecting to have to deal with the creature again. He was still tormenting poor Elizabeth. His brother was kind of there. I like William. I do like William. I think he's a lot different from the book. And I would like to say, I haven't read the book in many a year. I'm in the process of rereading it, but I haven't read the book in many a year. So all of what you're getting for the next few videos is purely the film. But, I like William. I think they could have done a bit more with him. But I don't dislike what they did. I think it's good. Anywho. Yeah, so... He's now in his white suit. I have specified that the white suit is used to mask his more impure actions. It's like he's kind of masking, he's putting on a facade, especially to all these like party goers and the wedding goers. He's like, my family and I, me and my brother, we are dressed in our full white tuxes, and Elizabeth is in her full white bandage dress, like bandage big wedding dress, and we are all pure and simple, and I've never done anything wrong, which is very obviously not true. But I just think it's very, very interesting that he's trying to mask and be as normal as he can until he decides to go into Elizabeth's chambers, and he's like, hey, you know, sorry I made a guy and then killed that guy, even though you were friends with him. I still, like, I congratulate you for being with my brother. However, you know, she slaps him in his face, down straight, as she should. As she should. I wanted to slap him in his face too. I wanted to. He deserved it. So, yeah, once again, he goes to congratulate Elizabeth in her room, still trying to make amends for destroying his work and the only being that she ever felt aligned with. Obviously, she's now very genuinely repulsed by the very notion of him, even though she's still willing to marry his brother. Like, she's aware that they're going to be a part of each other's lives forever if this wedding goes through. But, she's like, I'm here for formalities. We will speak on formalities. I want nothing to do with you. You and I, like, this means nothing. It's the be-all, end-all, And, yeah. And so, once again, his white tux, his white outfit, gets soiled with blood and soiled with dirt once the creature comes back, making a very reasonable demand. He's like, hey, could you make me a companion? That you've cursed me with life. Not only life, you've cursed me with immortality. And now you expect me to live this alone. And then Victor, obviously this is just after his umpteenth rejection from Elizabeth. He's now like, he's scornful, He's like, oh, you want a companion, what, you want a lover, you want someone you can procreate with, and rare. And it's like, he's projecting his own insecurities onto the creature. The creature never said, hey, I want a girlfriend. He just said, I just want a companion. I just want someone like me, so I don't have to deal with the loss of losing a friend again, because he knows it's just going to be that forever. No matter who he makes friends with, they will die one day and he will be left in the lurch. All he's asking for is someone like him. And Victor, being once again so blinded with rage at the very notion of Elizabeth not wanting him, is, horrible. He's horrible to the creature. And it's just so phenomenal scene. Obviously, then gets battered, gets thrown around the room. Elizabeth hears, she comes in, reunited with the creature for a brief moment, a lovely brief moment, before she is shot. She is shot by Victor. It's not funny. It's just like the timing of it is just so... Yeah. And I just found it so ironic. I'm like, as adult Victor, this is him in his quote-unquote purest form based on colour alone, and yet he is still doing nothing but destroying. It's like in a fit of jealousy and rage, he killed the woman he was so supposedly in love with, and, didn't appear to feel remorseful for it at all. And then when William and everyone else comes in, he's like, oh, the creature did it. Even though she was very evidently shot and he was holding a gun in his hand, I would be like, you sure about that? But, to each their own, I suppose. And, yeah. So, once again, this white outfit becomes soiled with blood, dirt, and wear and tear, encountering the creature and once again denying him any sense of humanity, leaving him in a one-sided altercation. No matter how you try to spin it, Victor in white in adulthood has a true wolf in sheep's clothing vibe to him, ever showcased through his relationships with Elizabeth and the creature. No matter how pure he tries to come off, he will always be that disgusting man who created life and had no patience, no nurturing side, no love and compassion for it, tried to kill it several times, killed his one quote-unquote true love in his endless pursuit for death towards the creature. I guess like divine punishment, the creature then goes and kills the one person that Victor is said to have loved the most, his brother. It's so sad. So sad. Perpetuating the never-ending cycle of destruction, the likes of which were first ignited by Victor's obsession with playing God. And so obviously the creature then carries Elizabeth through the house, takes her to the cave outside. Victor follows suit. And this scene I find one of the most interesting because it's almost like he's not even a man anymore. He's gone out into the snow, he's limping, he doesn't have his cane, he's only got one leg, he's got his prosthetic, but he's limping along, trying to find the creature. and he's got this massive brown fur coat on. He looks like a hunter almost. But because of Guillermo's kind of directing style and the camera work, because there's so many sweeping shots, he looks almost like a bear on the hunt. You know, he's transforming himself. He's no longer a man. He is a creature in and of himself. He is like a predator on the prowl, looking for the creature and looking for Elizabeth, as if, you know, hunting them both, as if to finish the job for both of them, because he's aware that, you know, Elizabeth is a lost cause. Elizabeth has been a lost cause since she met him. You know, she never liked him, but he was too conceited and too persistent to realise that. He looks like a huge brown bear prowling around for its next victim before being revealed to be just a man, consumed by bitterness and rage towards a creature that could have stood by his side, apologies, had he not been blinded by his own impatience and vanity. And I think the most interesting part of this, his ever-present red makes this dramatic return, but not as an article of clothing, as things that are staining his clothing. When in his last altercation with the creature, obviously after Elizabeth has passed, the creature is full of the same rage that Victor showed him. He breaks his nose, which then leads to, you know, blood is constantly pouring from his nose onto his mouth, onto his clothing. And I think it's so interesting, because red has always been an article of clothing for him. You know, even when he was doing his surgery and whatnot, when he was building the creature, he had his red surgical gloves, yeah, but he had blood staining his apron and whatnot, yeah, but he had the red surgical gloves, so there was always something tying it to him. And those red surgical gloves were obviously always his mother's, so that was always a piece of his mother with him. But now, towards the end, it's his own. It's coming from within. Yes, it's blood and it's red, but it's always going to be coming from within. It's an ever-present reminder of his wrongdoings, and, you know, he's lost everything at this point, and he knows that ultimately all of it is his own fault. It's all his fault. He has no one to blame for it but himself, which is why he just doesn't give up the chase. And, you know, he follows him to the Arctic. And I didn't realise this the first few times that I watched it, but like when he's saying, oh yeah, he chased me through the woods, through the trees, through the rivers, across the sea, I didn't realise that he meant that, like, yeah, he never went back to the house. He was chasing him forever. He's in that exact same outfit. When I only realised that when the creature when he's like trying to blow him up with the dynamite, and the creature's like, oh, you know, light it, you better pray that it kills me. And I didn't realise up until that point that he was wearing the same outfit that entire time. You can see the blood christening the kind of cut of his vest. And it's just like, that's less of a colour thing, more of a character thing. But it just shows he refuses to give it up. He is so blinded by rage that even as, you know, battered and bruised and broken as he is refusing to give the creature even like 1 minute of leniency. He cannot find it within himself, because he's so blinded by rage for his own actions. It's just absolutely ridiculous and quite sad. It's very sad. And now we have reached the final scene, the emotional climax, if you will. And I don't know, the notes for this part are a bit weird, because I wasn't entirely sure what to say. From what we can see of Victor, he's, you know, he's underneath a blanket, so you can just see the shirt of what he's wearing, which is white, you know, it's the white undershirt of, like, the kind of blousey one, you know. And the creature comes in, and he's in a lot of blues and browns, but because of the way the room is lit, it looks a lot like black. So it's very much like a white and black, like, once again, another yin and yang kind of thing. And it's like, it's a very simple scene. They're just having a conversation. There's no battle between them. And there's not even any vitriol, really. It's just Victor's aware that he's dying. The creature's aware that he's dying. And they're having their last little conversation with each other before, you know, it's lights out for Victor. And I've made a note saying how it's almost hypocritical that Victor's the one that's dressed in white during this scene, from what we can see of him, and the creature's the one that's dressed in the dark tatters. It's like, this man is not pure. nor is he absolved of his actions, regardless of whether or not the creature forgives him, which he does. It's so hypocritical. But that's kind of the point. That's the point, you know? It's like on his deathbed, he's finally having this moment of clarity, and he's like, you know, I recognize what I've done that has wronged you, and I recognize how much I've hurt you from this. And yet, you know, it's still... he acts as if it cleanses... Well, he doesn't act. He's dressed as if it cleanses him of his sins, which it never will. But I think that's what I kind of appreciate about this last scene. I think it's a matter of, you know, the directions being like... This is the hardest part for me to articulate. I have tried so many times to kind of write notes about this. I even tried to write like an actual script so I can just say what I need to say. But it's very, very difficult because it's not quite so simple. It's very, yeah, it's quite complex. But, you know, all in all, Victor is forgiven for his transgressions towards the creature, and he is allowed to transition from life to death with somewhat of a clean slate, which yeah, you know, it's very Catholic. That's one thing from watching a lot of the interviews, that's one thing I know Guillermo wanted to tell. He wanted to tell a very Catholic retelling of Frankenstein, and I think especially in this last scene he really got that. And you know what really shocks me about this last scene? I found out that was the first thing that they filmed. What? Oh my god. The very first scene that they filmed for the entire film was the last scene. It's like I remember watching an interview with Guillermo del Toro, Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi, and it was actually quite funny. If I can find a clip of it, I'll show it. But Oscar was essentially saying he didn't like how they'd done it the first time when Guillermo thought it was done, so he'd gone and raised his transgressions with him. And poor Jacob was in his trailer alone, and he was like, no, I messed it up. They're going to fire me because they don't want to do another take, and I'm going to lose my job.
You learn to listen to things going in a way that you don't expect them. It's actually the movie telling you, look, this is what I want to be.
Yeah, so for instance, quick anecdote. Okay. The first thing that we shot was the last scene. That's the last scene of the film, which is the crescendo of the emotional apex of the movie is the first thing that we shot. I spent the whole day preparing, listening to certain music, looking at pictures of, you know, loved ones that had passed, really kind of immersing myself, focusing. We did this scene. It was very moving, you know, Guillermo was really happy with it. It felt good. And then the next day I came in, I was only supposed to basically be a dead body for the rest of the film. And Guillermo showed me a cut of, an early cut of the scene. And I remember feeling a little disappointed with it. And I was sitting, waiting for the next shot. And Guillermo comes over and he goes, what's wrong? And I said, I'm feeling a little insecure. He's like, well, you are an actor. And I was like, no, I know. But I'm just feeling like, should I have looked up when I said sorry? Should I have? And he's like, no, those are just ideas. Those are ideas. You were there.
Choices.
Yeah, those are just choices. I have no doubt that we got it and it's good. And he's like, and I was like, okay, now I've got a 30-minute break. I'm going to go to lunch and I'll come back. When I came back, the shot was set up differently. And he says, we're going to do it again. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, let's give it another try. You know what? And he says, if something's there, we already got something.
You said something.
Yeah.
You said something that allowed that to happen. You said, I did it as me, and I want to do it as my father. Right.
And so
I said, okay, you're getting it.
So you're getting it. And he said, you know, we could all go home an hour earlier, or we stay an hour later, and we see what's there.
And that's what's in the movie.
Meanwhile,
Yes.
neither of them decided to tell me, and neither of you know this.
Well, you have
but
lunch.
I was in my trailer like, I ruined it. It was my first big scene on the movie. It was my first talking scene, and I was like, my voice is wrong, my movement is wrong, I didn't hit the thing. So I was sitting there in that take,
Percolating.
looking at the floor like, I'm going to get fired. Like, there's no world in which I'm coming out of this alive. And now you know. So
Yeah, but
communication is key.
I know I've contradicted myself a little bit here, but what I'm trying to say is this. In his final moments, Victor and the creature have their last reconciliation, airing out their grievances with one another. The black and white symmetry, to me, has deep connotations of an angel and a demon, with the creature taking on an almost Grim Reaper-esque appearance, which is juxtaposed nicely with his quiet and soft way of speaking. It appears to very much show that the creator is now left at the mercy of his creation, and his past transgressions will determine his fate. The creature's final piece of mercy to Victor is the final piece of the puzzle, officially breaking the perpetual cycle of torment and abuse that has followed Victor throughout his life. Yeah, and that is the end of Victor in Frankenstein 2025. Yay! Apologies again. We have a camera angle change because there's no curtain on this window, and the sun is getting really annoying. But yeah, the Red Guardian Angel being I wrote this about him. I wrote this when I was still kind of making notes about young Victor, so it's written in a bit of past tense. So his Red Guardian Angel being made of the deeper red yet to enclose him shows the inner warnings flashing in his mind, not yet aware of what he's being warned against. So it's kind of, you know, he used to pray to this red angel every night. It was a matter of, you know, help me, help my mother, and, you know, let us prosper and be happy. Didn't really work in the way he'd wanted it to, which is, you know, that's how it is when you pray. It's not, you don't pray once and it fixes all your problems. Neither do you pray 1,000,000 times and it fixes all your problems. It's just meant to be a guide for you to kind of, you know, go on and develop your own things. And as he kind of got further and further in his research, he kind of got further and further away from his religion too, because, you know, when you look at Catholicism, sorry, nearly said that wrong. When you look at Catholicism, or any kind of like, you know, Christian adjacent religions, it's very like, in order to create life, you need a man and a woman, and it has to be done in somewhat of a traditional way. As soon as he started to cheat that, as soon as he had the notion of just creating life by himself, by utilizing the dead body parts, that's when the angel started to become a bit more of a malicious overhang to him. It's like he'd have visions and she'd always be getting closer and closer, and as she got closer, her hand would always come up towards her face until he had the penultimate vision of her where she'd take off the mask and it would show the skull underneath. And for me, that kind of signifies how, you know, he's abandoned God, he's abandoned religion, and so she's not going to stand for it anymore. She's kind of like, you know, this is like, I'm taking my mask off and all you see is a skull underneath. Their relationship is dead as far as I'm concerned. That's the way I interpret it, at least. That's one of the things that's left up to, like, that's very, very much left up to interpretation. But that's how I see it, at least. If you have a differing opinion, please tell me. I'm really curious, because I don't see people talk about it as much. But yeah, but I think that concludes my analysis of Victor. Very much a misunderstood person, a very misunderstood man who, you know, lost his way and blamed it on everyone else. And that was essentially what became his undoing, if you see what I mean. And yeah, just as some final thoughts, I just want to say, you know, this film has, oh my god, it's such a good film, you guys. It's so good. This is one of those films where I'm feeling motivated and I'm feeling like kind of rejuvenated in ways I never thought I would. It's so refreshing to see a film like, yeah, obviously it's a Guillermo del Toro film and you've got all these big name actors, and obviously it's attached to Netflix, you know, like this was always going to be a big production. But there's something about how, like, this film is so authentic. And you can tell, like, even though obviously there's source material to this, there's source material that's existed for hundreds of years, it's still so much of Guillermo's own story and own characters. Like, this interpretation of them is so different from anything that's in the book. And it's just so, yeah, like I've had no interest in acting in a long time. I used to act a lot, like from literally when I was like a baby. I think I might have been like 3 or something, and my mum always used to put me in acting classes and stagecoach and whatnot. And I did that for a long time. I did that for a really, really long time. And I went on to study acting as well, and that's kind of what killed my love for it. And it's like, you know, it's fine to enjoy a film, and it's fine to enjoy like a theatre performance and whatnot, but there's something about Frankenstein that has made me, as bad as this sounds, it has made me want to create so badly. It's like, even this video in and of itself, I haven't written anything in a long time. I haven't written like essays and whatnot, or analysis, or I have, but in a different medium. It's like when I was doing my degree and whatnot, you'd write about, like, you'd analyze, you know, designs and whatnot, but I haven't done anything like this in a long time, and I had no motivation to do anything like this in a long time. And this film just came and absolutely decimated that sentiment. It's like, no, girl, get your ass up. we're gonna create. And yeah, and I really hope this video's made sense. I've got many more points that I wrote. I'm gonna draft it into an actual like essay, and I will post it on Substack. So if you think my voice is annoying, apologies, but you've made it to the end, so I'm proud of you. And I will give you the chance to like read this, so you can read it in your own time. And hopefully it'll be a bit more nuanced than what I've said, because I tend to ramble a lot because there is just so much to say about this film. So even as I've written all my points down, as I'm talking, there's new things that are arising, and it's just so, yeah. So, yes. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. I truly appreciate it. Well done for making it to the end, because I haven't edited this yet, but I can imagine this is hefty. I can imagine this is going to be a long video, because I talk a lot and I make a lot of jokes, and I don't like to cut out my jokes. But we'll try. And yeah, Elizabeth coming soon, hopefully within about a week or 2 weeks of this video coming out. I don't know when this video is going to come out. I'm recording this on the 17th of November. I'm hoping by like the 25th, maybe. We'll see. But yeah, thank you for watching. Please stay tuned for the rest, because I promise that it just gets better from here. I promise. And yeah, you know, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Have a blessed day. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay beautiful. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye. Also, did you like my gloves? I remember when I was watching the film and I realized he was wearing, like, you know, red leather gloves, and I was like, oh my god, I have red leather gloves. I'm Victor Frankenstein, you guys. But they're a bit too dark of a red. It's like you can see it in the light from the window. It's like they're a bit too deep. But I was like, you know, why not? It's fun. It's for a video essay. It's a fun time.